All right, so in this video, we're going to look at the expansion board for the SIO Control Kits. So what I have up here now is a completed board. So the main connection headers to the main control board are over here. We have terminals, and they're all labeled. And then, of course, we have these jumpers, and we'll talk about them as we go. The main bit of this video, however, is really going to be the assembly of this, right? So for some, this is old hat, and you've done lots of soldering, and this is easy, right? Now, one of the things we've done with our kit is we provided some jigs to make it easy, because honestly, if you're doing more than one or two of these, it's not easy, right? It's very tedious. And even one is kind of tedious. So we put together some jigs, and we also provide them with the kits. If you don't buy the fully assembled kit, but you do buy the kit, you get all of these jigs, and of course all the parts you'll see here today. So again, this is the fully assembled board. Everything's soldered in. This was my example. So there's some high contrast colors on here. I'm going to try and use those same colors today to make it easy for everybody to see. And typically though, however, when you get your board, you can pick the color of the jumpers and stuff. The terminals are typically blue. Sometimes they're green, but most of the time they're blue. But yeah, so anyway, let's get right into it. I'm going to show you what comes in the kit, and we'll start from there, right? So of course you get the board, right? So here's the PC board, right? Pretty typical, proto board, or not proto, but PC board. This really doesn't have a lot of functionality to it, but it does enable the creation of the jumpers and things to set up your IO. So the next thing to look at is one of our, of course, we have the terminals that come, and a lot of times they'll come sort of connected a little bit to make it a little bit easier on you. And then following that, of course, there's the jumpers, and these are the jumpers I'm going to use today. Although if you look in this bag, you'll see that there's the jumpers themselves, as opposed to the headers, are white. I have some yellow ones off to the side here that I'm going to use when we put things together. So anyway, so those are the general components. You also notice in here in this guy, there's some the resistors for the board are also in there. If we look back at this board, you'll see there's 4 of them that go in, and that's really for the fact that we have 4 IO points that are set up as input only, and they don't have any internal to the ESP32 any way to set them as an input pull up, right? So or pull down, whichever you might want. So they're kind of floating. So we made sure we added some good resistors on the board just to make it easy to hook up inputs if you want to. Of course, you can use all of these IO as outputs as well, and that's one of the reasons for the jumpers, to make sure that if you don't want to have anything being pulled up or pulled down, you can do that, and you can also align the secondary terminal for each of these to either VCC or ground. Right. So we'll, as we go through and assemble it, there are some markings on the board, so it makes it a little bit easier if you're just kind of doing some things. All right. So additional to the basic parts that go on the board, we also have the jigs that I spoke about, right? So the first jig is this little 3D printed case. It's kind of hard to see, but there's it's basically there's a little lip in here that that allows you to kind of set a board inside there. And another piece that comes, and it really is a jig, although it is also a PCB, is this guy, right? So this is the jig for putting in the headers, right? It is not there to put in the resistors. The resistors are typically pretty easy. I'll show you that as well. But before you kind of get to using this, you typically solder in the resistors as shown here, and I'll very quickly pull a few through on our board that we're going to work on, just so you can kind of see how they go. Okay. So, and then there is another jig yet, and you'll see us use this. This jig here is for the terminals, just to make it easy to get the terminals in and in place in a good way. So you'll see just how, kind of combining all of this together makes it really easy to, kind of get things soldered in, right? No fuss, no muss. Make it easy, especially for anybody that isn't, a professional solderer or anything like that. Anybody that's kind of new to this. I really want to make this stuff as easy as possible. Okay, so now to it. So let's see. First thing we'll do is we're going to take our board. We'll get our empty board here. I'm going to open up this baggie here. We'll just dump these contents out, right? And we'll grab these resistors. So there are 4, right? So what I'm going to do is I'll just show you how I pull these through, right? So typically they'll come bent like this already for you. Although if they don't for some reason, they basically just need to be bent, pretty close to the resistor, just like this on both sides, right? And then on the board, you can see how they're marked here. You can see there's the 4, right? There's no directional component to a resistor like this. So basically, you just take the leads that are here and you pop them through that hole just like so, right? And if you turn the board over, you'll see that they a lot of times will either go in, but what I typically do is I'll bend them out a little bit like that, and what that really does, it allows you to flip this board over, and then once you get all 4 of them in there, you can just solder them in, right? And that's how you kind of end up with a board that looks like this. Now I've already cut the leads off of this one, but basically you put each of these in and then you solder it in place, and that's what we'll do here real quick, right? So one of the things that's nice is I'm going to pop these other 3 in here, and then we'll throw it in our jig just to make it easy for us. But really for the resistors, you don't really need the jig. It doesn't necessarily add a lot to it. In fact, I may not use it as I go to do this. I need to put my glasses on. There we go. There's our second one. All right. I'm going to throw my glasses on here. All right. And we'll get our third one in. Right. And hopefully I'm staying in camera here. Sorry about this. I'm not really a video shooter, at least not at the moment. We'll get better at this as we go. All right. So now we have these 4 in here, right? Typically what I'll do is I'll actually just hold it like this. And kind of get my soldering iron, which I have off to the side here, get a little bit of solder, which I have around here somewhere. There it is. All right. And we just as you would solder anything, right? You want to make sure you touch not just the point on the board, but also make sure you're touching your wire coming up, right? And if you get good contact on the both of them, this will solder really easy, right? So you just kind of do like so on each one. Hopefully this is videoing well. Just get each one here. And of course we'll go back through and we'll clip these off. Right? All right. And typically, if you don't have all the soldering gear, I tend to use these. These are really nice, right? They they can clip down pretty nice, right? Clip them off. And you can just toss those away. You don't really need them. So I'm gonna just grab my other board here that already has the rest of them done. Maybe I'll use this one to show clipping them off a little bit if I need to redo this. Okay, so now of course we have our jig. We have some of our items here. So now the next thing we want to do is actually get all of our headers into this. And I'll show you the kind of the problem that we're trying to solve. So this header kind of needs to go in here. And if I put this in here, and then I really I want to solder it on the back, right? So turning it over and kind of soldering it down, it's not so bad when it's one, but you kind of have to do that for each and every one of them here, right? And really kind of and you can see the way it's kind of splayed out on the side there. Maybe you can't too much, but it is, and you'll just get fairly poor results. It's kind of tough. So what I've done is, I have this little jig here, and I talked about this a moment ago, and we got this guy. So, this guy, it goes right in here like this, right? And then what we can do is we can actually take these pieces, right, and just put them in where they go. Now when we put them in, we have to put them in what we would probably consider is upside down, right? Because they're not actually being soldered to this board. This board is simply just to hold them, right? So we put each one of these in, right? And you can see I'm kind of going along here. And let me find the other big one that I have here real quick. Right, we put each one of these in, right? And they'll all just go right in here. Oop, well, came back out with my finger. Get that guy. Get each of these in here. Make our lives easy for the soldering. right? Or a good number of these. If I remember correctly, it's 16 of these small 3-pin headers total. So there's quite a few of them. But they're all important. They give you the ability to really customize what you want to use for your extra I/O, whether it's input, output, or even, if you want to do I2C. Okay, so all of those are in here, right? And you can see kind of nice, they're all kind of sticking up. And we have our board, right? And if we orient our board so that it will fit over that, literally we can just drop it in here, right? Give it a little bit of a jiggle, and you can see it just kind of fell right in place, right? So what we have is it's nice, it's in place, they're all kind of sticking up, a little hard to see there, but that just kind of went right in, and it's not going anywhere, right? So we can do a quick solder job on this with almost no effort, right? At least no big worries about things falling out or being in a bad place, right? So basically, same as we did the other soldering, right? Just go ahead and make sure we're on each pin, and we got a good contact with the board itself as well. And you can just kind of go down here and just do each one. And I will do that, but you of course don't need to see all that. So I will fast forward through this. Oops. Right. All right. So you can see, got everything all soldered up, went really quick. I'm running my iron at 380 degrees Celsius, and of course I have a good tinned tip, and it goes pretty smooth. All right. So next we got to do the terminals, right? So the good news is we're pretty much done here with the more difficult part of this, and we can just turn this guy over, right, and then pull our little board off, our template board, and sadly we don't really have much use for this anymore. But yeah, so you can see how well this is all soldered in. Everything's straight up and down. It looks nice and beautiful, right? Pretty good, setup there, right? So of course we can put we could put our nice little pins on here or our jumpers on here. We're not going to do that yet. We're gonna put these terminal blocks in. So let me grab those out of this little bag here, which is exactly how you will receive them. So we'll pour these out, right? And you know, kind of the next jig, you know, I talked about was this guy, right? So it's, you know, it's kind of interesting how this one works. It, you know, it's really, you know, pretty simple. But you basically, you can set it in this jig, or you don't have to. I tend to set it in the jig, but you really can't see it too well in the video, of course. But there's, you know, the way these slots are, there's a little bit of an angle on these terminals, and they kind of slide right into there, so you can't put them in the wrong way, right? So they just kind of fit right in there, and if you put them in wrong, you know, it won't fit, or at least it won't seem to fit right. So we'll just stick these in. I almost put that one in a little bit backwards. So go like this, right? And you don't need to hook them together. There's no need to do that. You can if you want to. You know, they'll still fit in the board just fine. But basically from here, you can just take your other, you know, your board that you've just soldered, right? And you just kind of set it right on top there. Now you have this nice stable base, again, to just kind of solder those terminals right into it. Same way as we did the other bit, right? So we'll just go about that. And I'll probably fast forward through a little bit of this as well. But again, same exact temperature, same exact way of going about it. And you'll see when I push on this one the first time, it kind of lifted up a little bit on the other side. So I tend to go just do one on each side here real quick, just to kind of give it a little bit of weight on both sides. So, but otherwise, you know, it's just standard soldering. Make sure you make good contact, put a little bit of good pressure on it, right? If you don't put any pressure, it won't work very well. It's one of the reasons the jigs are helpful, is you can push down on it when it's in the jig. Don't have to worry about it sliding out from under you or anything. These terminals do take a little bit more solder than, say, your header connections, so keep that in mind. There's a bit bigger hole there to fill. All right, we're going to go fast forward now here for the second set. All right, so there we have it. We just pull this out. It's all nice. Everything's beautiful, right? We have a great looking board here, right? Now we'll talk a little bit about the setup for this board, since we have this here. There is more detail in the written instructions as to how this stuff works, but I will point out, you know, there's some markers on the board for each of these rows, and you know, the trick here, I am going to kind of turn it right side up for me so I can read it a little bit. But you know, there's two pieces of each IO point, sort of, right? So I have two terminals that are meant to be used for one input, so or output. And you know, typically, you know, you have what I'm calling the terminal and the sense. So it's T and S, right? So for these first four IO points that must be inputs, right? You can either make them you know, pull up or pull down, right? And then let's say if you make it pull up, then what you need to do is make sure that the second terminal is actually connected to and that way, if it's, you know, connected to ground, then basically all you got to do is, you know, connect those two terminals together with a switch or whatever, and you're all good, right? So so that's the whole idea to this. And you know, if you go the other way, if you make it a pull down, then you need to make the other terminal connected to the high side, right, or VCC. So in this case, that's, you know, 3.3. We aren't level shifting or anything on any of this. So you probably don't have a lot of distance on this, but, you know, more than enough for switches and things around your 3D printer, right? So if we were to configure this first one, right? And so this is, if we take a look here on the right hand side, there's kind of two sets of terminals for each one of these. And if you notice, like I said, it's the first four. So there's four where there's sets of two, and then there's this last one, which is a fifth one. Now that can only be or that can be input or output. So there's on that one and the rest on the other side of the board, all of those are really just, you're just setting the terminal one, because you can do a pull up or pull down as part of the programmatic setup of the IO within, say, the IDE or really the firmware, right? But you can't do the pull up, pull down for these first four, and that's why there's two sets for each of those. On the other ones, whether you set it in the software up or down, you still have to set the terminal one, the T jumper, appropriately. So if you go pull up, you want the T to be connected to ground. If you are pulled down, you want the T to be connected to VCC. So looking at this first one, if we're going to set this guy to a pull up, right? We would want the terminal to be set to ground, so we're going to put that guy there. And then if we want it to actually be a pull up, we have to set that other one to high, which is VCC. So if we look at this on the other side here, we have the pull up, pull down. It's kind of labeled there. So we're going to do a pull up, and it's going to go here. So the nice thing is you can see, really for pull up, you want them both on one side. For pull down, you want them both on the other side, right? And then of course, we'll take a look at this last one, which is IO10. If we set this guy up inside the firmware to be pull up, then we want to set this guy to ground, which in this case is on the outside. It's slightly different as from the other side, but you can see it's clearly labeled on here, and it should make perfect sense as you look at it and set up your IO, right? So again, if we wanted to set up all of our inputs to be all the first four to be input pull up, which is typically how I have my stuff set up, and that's also how they default, they don't, the first four don't default to anything, but you'll get better results in SIO using these if you do set them up as pull up. You won't have to check off that extra box basically saying it's up or down, right? So we set all of these like this, right? And then of course for our fifth one here, we're gonna connect that guy to ground, because we're gonna set him as an input pull up. We're gonna do the same thing all the way along for these other ones, right? So we'll just get these all in here, and then you'll of course get to see that it looks almost identical, if not exactly identical, to the first completed board that I showed you guys at the beginning of the video. And then that will really be it for this video. There are other videos on how to make the connections and other things, but if we kind of pull these two together, you can really see that these are pretty much identical now, this is how you would solder that in using all the jigs. Of course, after you're done with this, you don't really need the jigs any longer, but this is your basic setup. So like I said, take a look at some of the other videos, take a look at the documentation that came along with your kit. I really want to make sure that everything is as simple as possible, and you don't have to chase the details all over the internet to accomplish your setup. Please, any feedback is welcome. Would love some feedback on how I might be able to improve the documentation, or if there's another video that you would like me to produce. Probably in the future, I'll remake some of these as well as I get better at lighting and things of the nature. But anyway, there it is. Thanks, everybody.